Let's go to the leader of the Nationals in Australia now. David Littleproud joins me live from Canberra. Thanks for joining us, David. Just tell us your thoughts. I know you've been talking about it over the past few days, but as we see what London is about to go through, it's happening now in Edinburgh, and we'll see the public show their respects over the next 24 hours in Edinburgh and then the same in London. Do you get that sense of a huge moment in history, apart from all the personal insights, the sense of history?
Oh, it definitely is, Chris. I mean, 7 decades in the making. I mean, there's most on the planet would have known no different than Queen Elizabeth II as the monarch, and that's come to an end. And I think there was probably this feeling that it'd go on forever. As someone said to me the other day, it was just this constant you thought would never end. And obviously, I think the world's coming to terms with it. I think out of respect, I think the world has responded, as you would expect of someone of the magnitude of Queen Elizabeth II and the way that she's handled herself in the dignified and graceful way of a lifetime of service. And I think it's something Australians should reflect on the service you do provide your community. Obviously, the Queen Elizabeth was able to do it at a significant level, but every Australian should just reflect on what they can give back to their local communities. And I think that Queen Elizabeth II is someone that you could look at in terms of her selflessness over those 70 years.
Do you think that Parliament not sitting this week, when the British Parliament is sitting, the King Charles III will speak to the British Parliament tonight, and a public holiday in Australia 10 days from now, do you think that that's a bit much?
Oh, look, I think you've got to appreciate that while we take a lot of our traditions and protocols from the UK, they are tweaked to Australia. And I take on face value the advice the Prime Minister's received. And I think obviously we can only do that and accept it. I think there are protocols here that should be respected, and the gravity of this situation should be respected. I understand, obviously, Victorian businesses in particular are going to hurt more than others. But as I said earlier, this is once in seven decades that we've had to experience this. The timing is obviously never perfect in terms of how this happens, and so I just think we need to roll with this a bit, and we'll give the respect to the government that they need and the advice that they've taken in terms of Australia's protocols with respect to treating this and dealing with this.
Look, I think it's pretty hard to fault Anthony Albanese the way he's handled this. I mean, he's spoken with clarity and dignity himself. I've been critical of Charles in the past for some of his interventions on climate change, and this is what worries me. The new king, King Charles III, says he'll stay out of politics now. He perhaps should have stayed out all along, but he said he's going to say less in the future as the monarch, which is why these comments from Anthony Albanese yesterday surprised me.
King Charles will need to forge his own path. King Charles, of course, has been very active and outspoken on issues such as the need for the world to challenge climate change and to act on climate change.
Should he continue that?
In my view, that would be appropriate. That's a matter for him, of course.
Anthony Albanese there yesterday. David Littleproud, he's wrong there, isn't he, the Prime Minister, to encourage the King to keep talking about these issues. He knows they're political issues. He's going to need to stay out of them.
Yeah, well, I'll let the King take his own counsel, but from what his comments have been and the way that I interpret them is that he will carry on in the tradition that his mother did, in the dignified way of making sure that the institution of a head of state allows our democratic systems to take its due course, and the debate within that takes its due course without interference. And I would expect that the new king would undertake that. I think he's given every indication that he will, and while I respect his views as a prince, he's now taken the highest position in terms of the head of the monarch, and I suspect that he will carry on in his mother's tradition as he articulated quite clearly.
Yeah, absolutely. Take him at his word. That's what he said he's going to be doing from here on in. Let's return to the dour world of Australian politics now. And I just want to ask you about your Nationals colleagues in New South Wales, actually a Liberal Party in this case. But, of course, the former Trade Minister, Stuart Ayres, he's been cleared by an internal report. This is over the appointment of the former Nationals leader, the former Deputy Premier, to that trade job in New York. It all went belly up. But Stuart Ayres has been cleared. Do you think that's fine for him to go back into the Cabinet, the New South Wales Cabinet?
Well, I think the Premier will have to make that determination, but obviously if Mr Ayres stood aside and has no case to answer, then obviously that'll have to be a determination of the Premier and the timing of that. I think that gives Mr Ayres the suitability to obviously continue on in whatever role in the future, but the timing of that I think now would be the most appropriate thing for the Premier to consider, and when he does that, and about the continuity, most importantly, not to Mr Ayres but to the people of New South Wales, because ultimately that's who we're sent to serve, the people, and in his case the people of New South Wales. I think the Premier should make a determination at the most appropriate point in time that will be the most benefit for the people of New South Wales, not for someone's own individual political career.
All right, just over a month away now from federal budget, an early budget on the back of the election. I would have thought that what the federal government needs to do is constrain, cut spending, pull in spending, but you're worried that it's going to be looking for savings in the regions rather than elsewhere?
Well, that's exactly right. I'm not against the government trying to rein in spending, but you've got to have your priorities right. And what I fear is that the engine room of our nation's economy, the regions, will be the ones that will miss out. Tens of billions of dollars worth of infrastructure spend that were filling in supply chain gaps, making sure that we're able to get product from paddocks or pits to ports so that we can pay the bills, will be taken out of this budget. And that's also for key infrastructure like dams, water infrastructure that not only regional Australians should be worried about, but every Australian. On the east coast of Australia, there's this statistic of 37% reduction in storage capacity per person per megalitre of water by 2030 is going to hit us because no one's bothered to dig a hole to water us. And no state on the east coast has built a dam. And this is the problem that we've got. It's not just for agriculture and industry, it's also going to be our ability and amenity to turn a tap on. And this is where you've got to get your priorities right, whether it's be on dams, on roads, and even Northern Australia. This government has sent indications to us and evidence that they're not going to spend the billions of dollars, extra $2 billion that we put into the NAIF loan scheme, that is a loan and paid back to the Australian taxpayer, that would grow Northern Australia because they've dismantled the Joint Standing Committee on Northern Australia. 1.3 million Australians live up there, and where most of our resources are mined and our agricultural production is underground. And this is the challenge we've got. We just hope that this government will look at the budget in the sense of what's going to give the best return to the Australian taxpayer, and that is building key infrastructure.
Indeed, and in the regions, obviously. Thanks for joining us, David. I appreciate it.